When a program begins or ends, we don't want it to do so abruptly in most circumstances. Fading in at the beginning and out at the end makes a very nice transition and is usually the standard for programs. There are times when you may wish to fade to black at the end of one scene before starting another. Because we've done a crossfade, you can probably figure out how to do this, but there are some pitfalls you'll want to avoid. For our fade in, let's set the current frame to 1. Select the image strip that starts in that frame by right-clicking on it. If the Properties tab is closed, open it by pressing N on the keyboard. In the Edit Strip menu, set the opacity to 0. Hover the mouse pointer over the box and press I to lock in the keyframe. To make our fade in last 2 seconds, set the current frame to 60. You may think that it should be at 59, but that would only be true if we were starting our fade at frame 0. With the current frame set to 60, go back to the Edit Strip menu, set the opacity to 1, and lock in the keyframe. Scrub through the timeline to see how this fade in works. Before we move to our fade out at the end, let's change the duration of one of our crossfades. Currently, the crossfade between the strips in tracks 1 and 2 is 5 seconds long. Let's change that to 3 seconds. Right-click the strip in track 2 to select it. Press the up arrow key on your keypad. The current frame should snap to the first frame of that strip. The up and down keys can be used to jump from keyframe to keyframe. If there are no more keyframes for a strip, you'll get an error message. You can also see if you're on a keyframe by looking in the Properties tab. Keyframes have yellow backgrounds. The first keyframe for this strip is at frame 451. The second is at frame 600. Set the current frame to 600. Hover the mouse pointer over the opacity box and press Alt-I on the keyboard. The background for the box will change to green, which means you have deleted the keyframe. For a 3-second crossfade, we'll need to set the new keyframe to 89 frames after the first one for the strip. Adding 89 to 451 gives us 540. Set the current frame to that value, enter 1 in the opacity window, and set the new keyframe. To set the length of any fade or crossfade, figure the number of seconds you want it to last, multiply that number by 30, subtract 1, then add that to the frame number of the first frame. So in the example above, you'd start with 3 seconds, multiply that by 30 to get 90, subtract 1 to get 89, then add it to 451 to get 540. Practice with this. For our fade out, we need to fade 2 strips, because our image is composed of a background and an alpha overlay. Let's make this a 4-second fade out. Because we're fading out to the end, let's work back from the end. The last frame is 1800. For 4 seconds before that, we multiply 4 by 30 to get 120. Subtract 1 to get 119. Then subtract that number from 1800 to get 1681. If you're not good at doing math in your head, it's good to keep a calculator near the computer. Set the current frame to 1681. Right-click on the image strip in the 4th track to select it. The value in the opacity box should read 1. Hover the mouse pointer over it and press I on your keyboard. Now right-click on the image strip in the 3rd track and do the same. Press Shift and the right arrow key to go to the end of the timeline. Enter 0 in the opacity box and press I to lock in the keyframe. Right-click on the image strip in the 4th track and do the same. If you scrub along the timeline, you'll see the images fade out to the checkerboard background. When we render our frames, it will be replaced with a black background. In our next tutorial, we'll see how to do simple titles and graphics.